In my last Monday with Mounts blog, I was working on Romans 8:28, and in the process, I mentioned something in passing that I thought would be a good thing for you to be aware of, and the Bible study Greek approach, and that is the order of phrases in a Greek sentence. We try to keep the phrases in the same order, but sometimes a translator will say this phrase, when we put it into English, really needs to be done here in the translation. And Romans 8:28 is a really good example of one of those situations. So Romans 8:28 says, and we know that to those who love God, and that's the phrase in question, he works with reference to all things, and he works with reference to all things, and that's what I talked about in the Money with Mounts blog, and the he is God. God works all things for the good to those being, there's your participle, for those who are called and according to his purpose, is how it's usually translated. And I did mention in Money with Mounts is that there is a textual variant that repeats God here. So it's God works in all things for good. But you don't have to have that variant. Theon can be both a direct object of agaposin and it can be the subject of sunerge because of context. But that was that blog. But what I want to talk about is this phrase, to those who love God. Now, the order here, I think, is really significant because the emphasis on that this is a promise for God's children. This is not a promise for the people in the world. God is not promising people who don't know him, who don't live in a relationship with him, that he's going to work all things for good. But it's rather, this is a promise to those who love God. So this has to do with Christians, okay? And so that emphasis is really being put forward because of the word order. It's to those who love God that he works all things for good. Here's the problem. To those who are called according to his purpose. Well, who's this group? What does this tois go with? Well, it parallels this tois, doesn't it? But because in Greek you have this in between, it's not immediately apparent that those who love God are those who are called according to his purpose. So what will often happen in a translation, like in the NIV, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. See, they took that tois through theon phrase and they put it down here. Why? And this is the important thing. Well, because that way when you say, who have been called according to his purpose, you go, oh, that's the same group of people. Those who love God are those who've been called according to his purpose. And certainly that is what it means. And by the way, most translations do what the NIV does. The ESV, though, and I'm glad for this, keeps the order of the phrases and therefore keeps the emphasis. For we know that for those who love God, and they say, all things work together for good. I would rather them say, he works in all things for good. But the ESV keeps the order, but now you have, for those who love God, separated from those who are called, which is a bit confusing, but that's just the way it is. So if we want to phrase this, you can see what's going on. It's for we know that, then here's our first dative phrase, to those who love God, and then you get to the main sentence, so we're going to put that on its own line. He works all things for good, and then again, to those who are called according to his purpose. And so when we would indent this, who does he work all things for? To those who love God. And then he's going to tell us something more about who those people are. It's to those who are called according to the purpose. And just what I'm saying is that, in essence, what sometimes, for the sake of clarity, is going to happen is that we'll do it something like that. So what do we know? We know that he works all things for good. Who does he do it for? To those who love God, Who does he do it for? It's to those who are called according to his purpose. So anyway, it's just a good illustration of how sometimes, for the sake of clarity, the order of phrases needs to be changed. But often what will happen then is that there will be a loss of emphasis. Translation is an issue of compromise.